In recent years, Nintendo has kind of moved on from the 3DS as they focus more on the Switch. They ultimately decided to officially end production for the 3DS in 2020. Even then though, this is still a fantastic console, and I firmly believe it's still worth owning today. I actually think it's the perfect time to pick up a 3DS before they become more and more rare and rise in price for ones in good condition. And that's because it has a fantastic library of games that will age well over the years. Nintendo games do have a tendency of being timeless, and the 3DS I think will be much the same. Not only were there several games that were specifically developed with the 3DS in mind, but you also have access to DS games through backwards compatibility. That means you have nearly 2 decades worth of games to play on your 3DS. And on top of that, you also have the Virtual Console if you own the new 3DS or new 2DS. So yeah, you have a very large library of games, though for this particular list we will be focusing on games made for the 3DS in mind. In this video, we will be taking a look at the 25 best games for the 3DS. Now, this is only my opinion though, so if I do miss any game that you believe deserves to be on this list, make sure to let me know in the comments below. I do these videos in order to help you find great games, so hopefully this helps you out. With that said though, let's jump right into it. And to start this list off, I have Professor Layton and Azrin Legacy. It's not always easy to find good puzzle games, but Azrin's Legacy is the whole package. It has an enjoyable story with fun characters, high-quality cutscenes, the art style is pleasing to look at, and most importantly, it is absolutely jam-packed with puzzles to complete, many of which are very clever. If you like puzzle games at all, Professor Layton is definitely worth checking out. Kirby has been a well-known and beloved Nintendo mascot for such a long time. This little pink gumball-like character that absorbs enemies to take in their powers is both adorable and fun at the same time. And this long-running franchise has quite a few really good games available for the 3DS. The 3 that stands out to me the most though would be Kirby Triple Deluxe, Kirby Robobot, and Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn. All 3 of these games are fun Kirby experiences, though if I had to choose just one, it would probably be Robobot. It has excellent level design and you play as Kirby in a mecha suit. It's just different enough to stand out and still be a lot of fun. However, these aren't exactly the most difficult platformers, but they're still always a delight to play. Star Fox made a return to the 3DS that I'm ever grateful for, and that is Star Fox 64 3D. I love the original on the Nintendo 64 and would replay that game over and over again as a kid, and this game feels great on the 3DS. It's actually better than I even remembered, thanks to the visuals being improved. The gameplay though is just as fun as it ever was, as you fight in various locations both on land with a tank-like vehicle, as well as in aerial combat. I always enjoy the dialogue between the characters as well, and it's just a fun overall game to play on the go. Virtue's Last Reward is one of the more mind-bending games on this list. I think for its story and setting alone, this one can make the list. It plays out like a visual novel, but you do have choices to make throughout the game, and there are 28 different endings. Basically, you play as a college student who was kidnapped and forced to play a game that quite literally is a life or death situation. However, other characters are also playing under the same circumstances, so if you live, somebody else may die. This is where it's really thought-provoking as you come to care for the different characters. Now, it's also a puzzle game and can be quite challenging at times, but in terms of story, it's very good. While Hell's Laboratory is known for developing Kirby games, they also spawned a smaller indie-like franchise for the 3DS, Box Boy. This is a puzzle platformer with a simple mechanic. You play as a cube-like boy who can produce and spit out boxes to complete various puzzles. While it's relatively simple at first, much like its visual art style, it increases in difficulty as you progress by introducing new mechanics and even enemies. I really enjoyed this mechanic and the game as a whole. It's not the longest game in the world though, and you can finish it in a little over 5 hours if you want, but it's well worth your time and they have released a few sequels since its initial release. Pushmo is another interesting puzzle game that released on the Nintendo eShop almost out of nowhere, and it was a big surprise in just how good it actually is. Looking back on it, it's one of the better puzzle games that I can remember playing, period. It's unique in the sense it combines platforming with a puzzle mechanic in reaching the top. You do this by pushing and pulling blocks, though as you'll quickly find out, that is much easier said than done. It will test your wits with it having 250 different levels. These are short depending on how quick you can solve each puzzle, but Pushmo really is excellent if you like puzzle games. As an added bonus, I feel like this particular game is one of those games that actually benefits from the 3D feature. I've always felt that JRPGs fit perfectly on handheld devices. Something about the combination just feels so good to me, and with Radiant Historia, you're looking at one of the best the genre has to offer for modern times. It plays very similar to old school JRPGs such as Chrono Trigger. The combat is deep and it doesn't have random encounters. You have to run into them on the battlefield to start the battle, but for me the most interesting aspect was its story and time traveling mechanic. You can play in several different branching storylines depending on what you choose to do in the game. However, you can always go back in time to change timelines and go in a different direction. This was a well thought out mechanic, and I'm not sure I've seen a game handle this better than Radiant Historia. If anything, if you do like classic JRPGs, then Radiant Historia is a very well done modern take on those type of games. Monster Hunter Stories is an odd combination of Monster Hunters with Pokemon. I never would have thought of a combination like this, but it works surprisingly well. In Monster Hunter Stories, you hatch and fight alongside your monsties in turn-based combat. I like the art style in this game and it fits very well with a handheld device, the combat works well, and collecting and fighting with all of the monsties are both addictive as well as fun. Growing up, the Donkey Kong Country trilogy for the Super Nintendo were among my favorite games as a kid, and I love those games to this day. The music, the level design, the art design, and just everything about those games were absolutely amazing. As we all know though, Rare no longer makes Nintendo games, but Nintendo decided to bring this franchise back with Retro Games developing Donkey Kong Country Returns, and then it was later ported to the 3DS by Monster Games, and they did a phenomenal job. Donkey Kong Country Returns has that tight platforming that you want, great level design, and with each monkey you get slightly different abilities. Diddy Kong will hover around with his jetpack while Donkey Kong pounds on the ground. You get those famous minecart levels, the mesmerizing music, and everything that you want in a platformer in a brilliant handheld package. Here recently, Luigi's Mansion has seen quite the rise in popularity with Luigi's Mansion 3. Next Level Games did a great job with the Switch release, but truthfully they already showed they can make a great Luigi's Mansion game on the 3DS. Darkmoon, otherwise known as Luigi's Mansion 2, offered yet another charming and spooktacular experience. In Darkmoon, you actually explore 5 unique mansions. Yeah, you're not just one location in this game, and with each mansion you explore, you have a completely different environment where they introduce new things to the game. For this exact reason, you're always on your toes to see what happens next, and if you like Luigi's Mansion, then this is a must-have game. Monster Hunters has a long history of handheld games being popular on the PSP and then the 3DS. And after years of perfecting the formula came Monster Hunters 4 Ultimate for the 3DS. It brings that familiar formula of hunting down large monsters, slaying them, upgrading gear so you can defeat even more monsters, and so on and so forth. It's a rather easy gameplay loop to understand, but with a lot of complexity and by far one of the most addicting gameplay loops I've seen in any game. Do not be surprised at all if you lose hundreds of hours to Monster Hunter. With 4 Ultimate though, you have a wide abundance of weapons and boss encounters, and even though the visuals are a little dated compared to the newer entries, this is still a fun experience for any Monster Hunter fan, and kind of nostalgic for those looking for a traditional handheld experience. If you're looking for more of a relaxed type of game on the 3DS though, you also have Animal Crossing New Leaf, and what a wonderful game to have on your 3DS. There's a good chance that you've played New Horizons on the Switch as it's incredibly popular, but some people do actually prefer New Leaf. This is a full-sized Animal Crossing game with a lot of content. As usual, you build your town, welcome in new villagers, and progress your life on a daily basis. More or less, it's an adorable life sim, and a very good one at that. This is a nice game to own on a handheld device, as you can pick it up and play it anywhere at any time to achieve a quick goal before putting it down. This is not one of those games that you're going to want to play in one sitting and never come back to it again. Instead, you'll find yourself addictively logging in every single day to further advance your world in New Leaf. The first Shin Megami Tensei released back in 1992, and since then has produced quite the series including the popular Persona spin-offs. The mainline franchise though has grabbed JRPG enthusiasts for its challenging gameplay and capturing and fighting with demons. While Shin Megami Tensei 4 is among its better releases, It's often criticized for its pacing and having a slow start, but once it gets going, you won't look back. It's got good presentation, the voice acting is done well, and per usual, the combat is excellent as you explore enemy weaknesses to get more turns. This is one of the better JRPGs available on the 3DS, and also one of the better Shin Megami Tensei games. The long-running Mario & Luigi franchise has been among the best handheld games that Nintendo has published since the Game Boy Advance, and luckily you can play every one of those games on the 3DS. My personal favorite of the bunch is Inside Bowser's Story, where you can quite literally play inside of Bowser. This means what happens to Bowser on the outside will also affect the world around Mario and Luigi on the inside, and then vice versa. It's creative and puts you in all kinds of interesting different scenarios. Now, a lot of fans want Nintendo to bring back the classic Paper Mario games or Mario RPG, and that's where Mario and Luigi comes in. This is a turn-based RPG and it oozes personality and charm. They play very similar to Paper Mario, with you having to do different actions within its combat, and I truly cannot recommend these games enough. Next up, I have Mario 3D Land, which is almost like a mix of the classic 2D Mario games with more of a 3D world. This combination works rather well too. It's both familiar and unique at the same time. Of course, it has great level design as you would expect from the Mario franchise, and if you play it in 3D, it gives it a nice effect and adds to the gameplay, in the sense that you can be more precise with your jumps while using the 3D feature. Once you beat the game, you also have the opportunity of playing a harder special world, where it really ramps up its difficulty, and that was greatly appreciated by me. I do like challenging games, and that's what always stood out to me when it comes to Mario 3D Land. I do think this game deserves to be remembered as one of the better Mario games, and something you should absolutely own for the 3DS. The Dragon Quest franchise has been around for more than 30 years, but so many people in the West have somehow missed out on this franchise. It, however, remains a main pillar over in Japan, and it's viewed as one of the best franchises in the JRPG genre. It ranks right up there with Final Fantasy, but what is the best Dragon Quest game? Well, that debatably is Dragon Quest VIII, which originally released on the PlayStation 2, but here it was ported to the 3DS. And you know what? It feels absolutely fantastic as a handheld game. You get a bunch of added content with this release, such as new recruitable monsters, new weapons, the ability to speed up battles, which is always a welcome addition for a game like this, and so much more. The story is great, and if you like Dragon Quest games or JRPGs, then Dragon Quest VIII is something you need to play. Now, with almost every Nintendo console, you have a great Mario Kart game behind it, and this time it's with Mario Kart 7, which I think is one of the best in the entire franchise. Mario Kart 7 is what really hooked me on competitive Mario Kart games online. There's a lot of customization with each kart and character, and it's a blast to play online as well as offline. It's got some fun and creative tracks, the glide mechanic is a lot of fun, and of course it's still as chaotic as ever. At the end of the day though, this is yet another good Mario Kart game. I mean, you kind of know what you're getting out of these games, but it's always a ton of fun every single time you play. Fire Emblem is yet another franchise that's been on the rise as of recent, with games like Three Houses and Smash Bros. Introducing the world to 50 different Fire Emblem characters. I kid, of course, but Awakening is among the best in the entire franchise, and one of the finest entries ever for tactical turn-based RPGs. It's got a shocking amount of depth to it for fans of the genre, but more or less you move units across a grid-based field and try to outwit your opponent in almost chess-like combat. Now, for more hardcore players, you can play with permadeath on, but if you're not into that type of thing, you can simply turn that option off. The presentation is also really good for a 3DS game with CGI cutscenes. Awakening is an excellent game through and through. Bravely Default is one of those JRPGs that I just absolutely fell in love with. I think to this day it might have the best combat system I've seen in any turn-based game, and there are various reasons. Bravely Default is essentially a classic Final Fantasy game. In fact, it was originally planned to be a Final Fantasy game, and eventually Square Enix thought it was strong enough to be its own franchise, and they were absolutely right. It does play out like a classic Final Fantasy game where you can change your jobs to fit the style of gameplay that you want, but it's the Brave Default combat system in where it really shines. With each turn, you can choose to default to bank turns, or you can unleash up to 4 attacks all at once with an individual character. This really becomes very strategic the further that you get into the game, and yes, this game is very challenging and much more than what I originally thought it was going to be. This makes you really strategize in how you build your team, and then to top it off, I really like the story and its characters. The only complaint I really have when it comes to this game is the last part of the game, which was more than a little repetitive, but the ending, in my opinion, was well worth it. Now, Kid Icarus Uprising is a game that I hold in high regards. I never played the original game, but Uprising blew me away when I first played it. Nintendo is not well known for shooters, but Kid Icarus is an action third-person shooter. The entire control scheme is centered around using your stylus to aim, and there's two forms of combat. You have aerial and then ground combat. The aerial combat is high speed with stunning set pieces. This game feels perfect when it's in aerial combat. Some users do struggle a little bit more though with its ground combat, as it can take some time getting used to the controls, but I never really seem to have that issue. I actually think using a stylus as a cursor in a shooter like this is brilliant. Analog sticks are not well known for their accuracy, but with the stylus it feels more like a mouse and how precise it is. Then there's the characters and the story in this game, and I have to say, it is among the best in any Nintendo game ever made. The narration for Uprising really had me sucked in, and I love the characters in Uprising. Honestly, if there is one game that I think Nintendo should bring back, it's Kid Icarus. This game absolutely deserves a sequel. For the first time ever, we got a Smash Bros. Game on a handheld device. When I first saw that, I could not believe it. I was amazed that they somehow pulled this off, and that's part thanks to the cel-shaded art style that they went with for the 3DS version. More or less though, this was still the exact same Smash Bros. Experience that you would get on the Wii U at the time. So here you have a full Smash Bros. Experience on a small handheld device. I still have a hard time believing they somehow pulled this off, and it worked very well. My only real complaint with this game is that it can be a little hard on your analog stick under prolonged use. It, however, is among the best fighting games ever made, and you can take it on the go whenever you like. Metroid Samus Returns is sadly a game that was largely ignored on the 3DS, as it released later on in the 3DS lifecycle. By the time Samus Returns released, the Switch hype was already well along its way, but this Metroid did end up being one of the best 3DS games to date. It's actually a remake of Metroid 2, though it's better in every aspect of the meaning. Metroid has always excelled when it comes to atmosphere, and I think with Samus Returns you can really feel the atmosphere with the music and the visuals combined. The Metroidvania genre, though, as of recent has really grown in popularity, but I think with Samus Returns it once again shows why Metroid is viewed as an all-time great all these years later. The boss encounters, even though is a little repetitive, it's still fun. The world is phenomenal in how you traverse it with abilities you pick up along the way, and you always feel a sense of progression. I know a lot of people missed out in this game before, but it really is among the better Metroidvanias to ever release on any console. Now here I actually have two different games, and that's the Nintendo 64 Zelda remakes, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. These are viewed as classics for a reason, and the 3DS brought them back in a major way. This might actually be the best way to play them on a console without emulation. You have Ocarina of Time, the timeless classic, for its mesmerizing world and story that really sucks you in. I find it amusing though that the original blew so many people away with it being a full 3D game, and then Nintendo brings it back with the introduction of the 3D feature for the 3DS. I thought that was pretty cool, but let's not forget Majora's Mask. This is probably the strangest Zelda game to ever be made, but a lot of people feel really connected with its strangeness. It sets it apart and it's truly a memorable experience. Now 1 and 2 you can really swap because I think both of these are about pretty much equal depending on what you like more. My favorite though is Pokemon, and without a doubt has had a huge impact on my life. These are among my favorite games ever made, and the 3DS has access to a large portion of mainline games, whether through Virtual Console, backwards compatibility, or games specifically made for the 3DS. The 3DS Pokemon games that stands out to me though is Pokemon X and Y. When X and Y first released, this was a major step for the Pokemon franchise. It was their first try at more of a 3D world rather than simple sprites. I was actually originally concerned with this transition, but it worked amazingly well. X and Y's art style looked nice, I enjoyed the Paris-based world, the Pokemon looked better than ever before, competitive was amazing, and the addition of Mega Evolutions are still among my favorite additions to recent Pokemon games. I do view Pokemon though as the ultimate handheld experience. These games are just so timeless, but truly, with the 3DS there are plenty of good Pokemon games to play. Honestly, I'd recommend them all. And finally, I have Zelda Link Between Worlds. Between this and Pokemon, it's such a close #1 spot, but with Zelda, We really don't get enough of these top-down Zelda games anymore, and that's really too bad. I've always preferred them to the 3D games personally. Both are amazing, but they do feel great on handheld devices, and they emphasize puzzles a little more. With Link Between Worlds though, it introduced a new mechanic to where you can turn into a painting and traverse across flat walls, or even slip into an entirely different dimension. You're not just trying to save Hyrule this time, but also Lorule, which is sadly crumbling away. You have 8 dungeons to complete, and interestingly enough, you can do them in whatever order you want, because you have access to all of your weapons and gadgets from the very beginning of the game. You access them by purchasing or renting each item, which of course is required to complete specific dungeons and puzzles. It's an interesting take on the Zelda franchise, but because you get so much currency in this game, you can buy them all without much effort really. Nonetheless though, the puzzles and dungeons are very well done, and the story is one of my favorites in Zelda games. I did love the ending of this game. I think just from beginning to end, this was a fantastic game. Really, I can only hope Nintendo makes a new top-down Zelda game sooner rather than later. Anyways though, that's it for this video, but if I missed any of your favorite games, make sure to let me know in the comments below. With that said, if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.